Hello, it's Stephen Day here from Kantar. I'm the Chief Procurement Officer, and I wanted to share with you a couple of my thoughts about sourcing resilience and some of the things that I've seen over the course of the past 18 months. I think there are two things that we will need to incorporate into our sourcing methodology going forward. The first one is I think we've got to factor in the cost of resilience more than we have done historically. So that means whether we have dual supply chains, we carry inventory, we pay for capacity even though we may not necessarily need it. So very much resilience. I think the second thing we've got to begin to start doing is factoring in the costs of the environmental impact that we have in terms of the products and services that we source. And I think we've got to begin to start being more realistic about what the costs of those things are. I think the combination of those two things will shift quite substantially the focus on cost to a more inclusive type of cost of impact. A large number of procurement functions report into the CFO community rather than an operations community. And in fact, in the Resilience White Paper, John Quatorna talks about that specific point about the disassociation between procurement and supply chain. Look, I don't think there's an instant organisational fix, but I do think it's on leaders such as me in procurement to make sure that we're balancing the points that we're getting from the finance community while simultaneously working with other leaders in the business so that we can present a more balanced set of KPIs and goals that we need to achieve as a function rather than just kind of taking direction from the finance community. It's not easy. It's going to take a lot of our skills to navigate and manage our stakeholders, but I think that's ultimately the role of procurement. It's just not about whether you can do a deal, it's about whether you can navigate what can sometimes feel like conflicting objectives to get a balanced scorecard for the benefit of the enterprise. In truth, have we seen great practice coming out of the experiences that we've had? I'm not sure we have. I think what we've seen is Herculean efforts on the part of many procurement and supply chain professionals that have gone over and beyond what could have reasonably been expected to make sure that they can continue to run and operate their supply chains. If you think about the food supply chain, we've been blessed that we haven't had any serious disruption. But then we've got the automotive industry. I mean, for years, I would certainly have considered them best in class, but they've had a big disruption with chips. And again, one can argue whether that's COVID related or in fact was that simply the fact that the supply chain and the procurement function didn't anticipate the huge demand that would be required in terms of microprocessing technology. So I think that points to a kind of more broader theme actually, which is if all of the things that we've learned through COVID is actually we've got to get better at understanding what are the themes in our business, what are the sources of supply, and where's there's going to be competing demand for narrow band capacity in our supply chains. And my thought would be that's where the points I spoke about in terms of resilience have to really kick in. We know that, for example, in pharmaceutical, they're now building vaccine production facilities onshore nearer to the points of demand. 3-4 years ago, I'm sure they would have argued the point that they'd optimized their manufacturing capacity. They didn't need to do that. So, a couple of examples, I think, where this notion of resilience is now translating into more near-field manufacturing capacity. But again, I still make the point, I think we've got to get better at kind of forecasting the horizons of where our demand is going to be and working with our supply chain to expand capacity. Firstly, we've got to get better at data. I mean, I really believe that historically most procurement functions haven't seen the curation of the vendor data, the management of their catalogues, you know, the data of their spend as necessarily something that required investment. And I think that one of the big lessons is data in the world of procurement is really, really mission critical. We've got to get better at codifying it, curating it and managing it and using it as points of truth to guide our sourcing strategies. That's one thing. The second thing is I think we've got to work much more through the supply chain and understanding what's happening there. And I think we've used supply chain audit and control as a tick box exercise. I think we've got to use that more as an organism that delivers holistically from end to end, and we've got to be more sophisticated in our thoughts about that. And then the third thing is, I think we've got to understand that, you know, I think we've just got to move to a model now where we really have a sense of economic value rather than just price. It's too easy to measure year over year cost reductions, but I think we've got to start factoring in some of those other components as well. So, you know, suppliers that bring sources of innovation, suppliers that can bring flexibility and agility, suppliers that can build a model that begins to help reduce the environmental impact. You know, really, really important things. So they're the kind of three things I call out.